Hey guys, welcome back to the show. We have a great episode for you today, as always. Before I launch into our regularly programmed material, I wanted to give a shout out to the registered nurses who are listening to this show. I know that you're out there. I know there's a whole bunch of you, and I have a really cool proposition for you. If you're needing to earn continuing education credits, which we know you do because you're in this constant stream of learning, which is what makes you so great at your job, there's a new way for you to earn those CECs. And that is simply by listening to podcasts like this one. Let me explain. Well, I'm not going to explain in too much detail. I'm going to direct you. All you have to do to learn how you can do that is go to renegade.pro, and that's RNEGADE.pro. Use discount code NIDM to save 10%, and you get to earn your CECs by listening to podcasts just like this one. So that's for our registered nurse listeners. For everybody else, I want to thank you guys for being here. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you love the show, please make sure that you leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on, because that is how we rise up the ranks and reach more people just like you. And of course, you can head over to natnidham.com, where you can learn about the new and improved and revived longevity community. That's my membership community. And also where you can sign up for the newsletter. And don't forget that there are two different newsletters. There's the general newsletter, and there's also a very special, specific peptide newsletter that you can also sign up for. So that's natnidham.com. So today you get to hear from my new friend, Sandy Martin. We will hear about her journey from running massive events like GalaxyCon to battling frustrating symptoms that finally resulted in a diagnosis of mold toxicity. I'm excited for you to hear about her incredible story of recovery from mold exposure and how it led her to create an event that brings science, health, and some seriously cool tech. Plus, we'll get into the wild world of sound healing and how Gongs might just be the biohacking tool you never knew you needed. You'll hear more about Sandy's amazing Biohacker Expo in the episode, but I wanted to mention that she has offered the listeners of this podcast a very generous discount of 50% off your ticket to the expo. All you have to do is go to biohackerexpo.com and use code NAT50. Did I mention it's in Miami? I'll definitely be taking a break from the cold and heading down to the expo at the end of the month. I will actually be speaking on the first day on February 28th. So it runs from Feb 28th to March 1st. So once again, if you're interested, head over to biohackerexpo.com and use code NAT50 for 50% off your ticket. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Sandy. Sandy Martin is a health advocate who turned a personal battle with mold-related brain injury into a mission to help others heal affordably. After spending $97,000 on recovery in her first year, she founded Biohacker Expo to share low-cost health solutions that actually work. So once again, head over to biohackerexpo.com and use code NAT50 for 50% off. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Sandy Martin, welcome to the show. It is such a pleasure to have you here today. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you. I am too. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, we've finally, it's funny, we've been kind of crossing paths at different events for almost 2 years now?
Yeah.
And we've finally got to talk to each other. And all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, where have you been?
Absolutely.
So it's really exciting to have this conversation. And like I said to you, you've picked such an interesting path that is not the easy road to do what you're looking to do. And I respect that, I think that being in the world of hosting an event of the scale that you put on is not for the faint of heart. So congratulations, because you're doing amazing things. You're putting beautiful content out into the world. And I'm really excited to share with the audience your story. Like, why are you doing this? Like, so guys, for those of you who don't know, Sandy is the heart, the soul, and the brains behind the Biohackers Expo. And so today we're going to learn a little bit more about her. I'd love to invite you to talk a little bit about your event and your vision for it, and then see where we go from there.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. So, I don't know where to start.
Well, tell me a little bit about you. Like, how did you get started in this space? Like, what made you think or decide to host an event of the scale that you're putting on? Because this is not a small undertaking. You didn't say, "Oh, I'm just going to do like a little thing in a little hotel. Maybe we'll just rent a conference room and do this little thing, and then we'll see where it goes." You kind of went in like whole hog, all guns blazing. So, what possessed you? What's your story? Why do you do this?
That's a great way to frame that question, because now it sets me up to answer differently than I ever have before, because that's a different part of the story. I mean, I used to run really large events, like 60,000 attendees in a weekend.
Whoa.
And so I was doing that in Miami, Raleigh, Richmond, Minneapolis, Louisville, and I was running GalaxyCon. And it was for geeks and sci-fi nerds and cosplayers and wrestling fanatics. And it was tons of fun. And I was the operations of that business. Everything for running it, not the vision, not the booking of the guests, but operating it and making sure it ran smoothly. That was me.
That's incredible. And that's an important piece of the puzzle that I think a lot of events don't get.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put it out there.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then
we had a situation in 2017 where we launched our first event out of market. We were in Miami and we launched a Raleigh event, and it was too taxing for the team to run both. And I said, book me all the guests. Don't even think about Raleigh. I'll do it. And so I put together, we had 20,000 attendees that year. Wow. And I did all of the marketing, all of the materials, all the operations, the catering, the vendor sales, everything other than booking the talent and bringing them in.
Wow.
The agenda, all of the community involvement, all of that was me. And I did it in 6 months' time. And so when I got to a point, I got alopecia. I went to the doctor for chest pains. I mean, it was not easy, but I did it, you know?
Okay.
And so I knew
feather in your cap.
I knew what my capacity was.
Okay.
But between then and now, I found myself in a period of time, it was October 2020, when suddenly I was top of my industry, top of my career, everything, like just killing it, loving my work, really knocking it out of the park. And then suddenly I couldn't run the reports on the business I had created the month prior. I couldn't read a spreadsheet. I couldn't work through a to-do list. I could not do anything sequential. My short-term memory was almost completely gone. If I wasn't paying attention in the moment with the intention to remember this in the next moment, wouldn't happen. I was 45 and I had what I called buffering. It was beyond brain fog. So you remember the pinwheel on the old Macs when you would think or on Netflix?
Wheel, I call it the wheel of death.
I was buffering.
Wow.
And so I was terrified. It was 2020. We had just refunded $400,000 in tickets for GalaxyCon Raleigh because of COVID.
Oh my God. Yeah. That'll freak you out.
And then we had to reinvent the business. In that year, we created the world's largest celebrity meet and greet business. It was unreal. And then so I converted something that we kind of stitched together barely into a solid e-commerce platform in September of 2020. And in October, I couldn't run the reports. And I had no idea what was going on. And so I thought, I must be stressed.
Which is a reasonable assumption, given what you've just been through.
Right.
Yes.
And I took a couple days off. And in those days off, I started to watch some YouTube videos about the brain, about depression, about stress, about overwhelm. And that was those first couple days, I heard the word mitochondria for the first time since the 10th grade. And I learned that functional medicine existed.
Mm.
And so I started a journey into this world from that point, but I had no idea what I had done or how this could have happened. And had I gone to, I went immediately to a neurologist, and I got a brain scan because I had watched some videos about Dr. Amen. So I had a SPECT scan done, but I was not of this world. I was scared of COVID. I was scared to get on an airplane.
Mm.
And so I had the test done locally by somebody who didn't understand Amen's methods, who performed the test incorrectly, who misdiagnosed me.
No.
And so I got diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury from a bump on, he said, from the bump on my head when I was 10 years old. It had come back to haunt me. He sees it all the time.
You're kidding me.
I can't make this up. And so he recommended that I take a stroke drug to open the blood vessels in my brain, and hyperbaric 80 sessions, which was going to be $20,000, and neurofeedback, which is about $2,500. When I went to the hyperbaric clinic, the doctor there said, you know, oxygen sometimes can be toxic to the brain. If I put you in one of these 2.0 machines with pure oxygen, it might do more harm than good. You should probably consider a mild chamber at home. And he wanted to rent me one. I ended up buying one. But what he said to me also in that session, well, he asked me what else was recommended. And when I told him that the doctor recommended nimodipine, he said, oh, is it Dr. So-and-so? And I was like, yeah, right. So yeah. And he goes, he's the only one that recommends that drug. And that was it. That's when I understood that I wasn't going to get the answers. I wasn't going to just be able to trust a doctor to get through this. And that started my journey.
Wow. And so what was it in the end? It wasn't the bump on your head from when you were 10 years old.
It was not.
You know that.
And it wasn't arsenic either. I had a false positive on an arsenic test.
Yeah.
It was mold.
Oh, shoot. Well, and you live in Miami. Did you live in Miami then?
I lived in Broward County. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's
very moist.
It's moist. Moist is a good word. Moist and mold go together. They're just as unpleasant words as each other.
Yeah, they really are.
Wow. So you figured that. When did you figure out the mold connection?
So Dave Asprey talks about his brain scans in one of his books that he had done with Dr. Amen. I took Dr. Amen's brain certification course when I was sick so that I could read my scans because I knew my doctor was not reading them correctly. And that's when I found out exactly how it was performed incorrectly. But I had one scan that matched one that Dave described, which was how Amen said, oh, that's toxic exposure. And then Dave's toxic exposure happened to be mold. And so it's just pure coincidence.
Oh, no,
and that
it's
took
not.
Me.
Let's be clear. There's nothing coincident. No, there's no coincidence here. This is the universe delivering what you need and you stepping up.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's reframe that and let's move on. Yes.
I appreciate that. And so I got a mold test, but it took me a month to find a doctor who would do it. It took another 2 weeks to get results. And then from there, I was able to start healing. I mean, we can go into how I encountered 2 bad functional medicine doctors and had to heal on my own. I don't know how far we want to go into this, but.
Well, I think we probably don't need to go into the gory details, but it brings up a really good point. And it brings up the key to your journey, which was that you learned that even in the functional space, or you inherently knew, well, you figured out really early in the game that even in the functional space, there's going to be a range of capacities and abilities. Yeah. And I think that what we do, like what I do as a podcaster and what I've done as a coach with people, we walk with people. We don't heal people. We don't tell them how to heal. We empower people. We give them the knowledge so that they can have agency over their own journey. And that's what you did. You took back agency over your healing and over your condition. You will tap into experts because we need to. We can't be experts in everything.
Right.
But you have to be able to educate yourself and hold enough knowledge to ask the right questions to be able to understand, are you being given good advice? Is this right for you? Can you tap into your even intuition comes into play? I know it sounds woo, guys, but at the end of the day, if you think that something's not working for you, sometimes you do need to stick with it a little longer, but sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so basically you had to kiss a couple of frogs before you hit your prince.
Yeah. Turns out I'm my own prince.
As it turns out. And so did you have to move out of your place, or were you able to, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to move.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was probably the first thing that allowed me to heal. I dropped $13,000 in one day with my second doctor.
Yeah.
And
that's shocking.
It's just, once they know you're that desperate, they have you.
Yeah.
And I had the money. And so I was able to spend it, and I had no other avenue that I could make any sense out of. Mm-hmm. But the things he taught me put me on the path to healing. And so while he ripped me off, he did give me the advice that I needed. I mean, he never gave me the genetic test results that he ordered. He never told me if I have the gene to detox mold.
He didn't?
No.
Why?
He was $650 an hour. He didn't prep for the session. And I sat down with him. He looked it over, and then he changed the subject. I don't even know if he knew how to read it. I presume he did, but he never told me. I still to this day don't know.
I think that's the HLA genes, and what they indicate is that you're more prone to suffering from chronic mold because your body's less able to clear it. So your pathways aren't optimized. So I think that, I think there's a question I want to ask you, which will help the audience. But the fact that he didn't actually even give you your results so that you could go figure it out on your own or find someone else is virtually malpractice, right? It's taking advantage. So before we move on, and this is going to be, you guys, your first bucket of gems from Sandy here of this podcast. And if you even stop just here, which I don't suggest you do, but if you did, you're going to walk away with value. From your experience, what are the questions and the things that people need to ask? What are the danger signs you need to look for before you drop that kind of money on someone?
Oh gosh. Nat, honestly, I don't know. What I am going to say is what I learned along the way in life. I play gongs now. I picked this up because gong baths helped me detox the mold. Sound can penetrate matter. And so sound waves can go through the brain, aid lymphatic drainage, and move it out of the brain and body.
Interesting. And that makes sense, actually.
And so what I know about playing gongs is that it's not a thing you do. I don't play the gongs. I listen to the gongs. Mm-hmm. And so what I think people really need to do is to work their listening muscle. So one of the things that I have learned in my life along the way is how to listen. Mm-hmm. And I've learned this because I play gongs. And the gongs have taught me they never sound the same way twice. So you can't play them. They aren't a musical instrument. They're a vehicle for observation. And so my listening muscle has gotten better. And what I think with doctors we have to do better is we have to listen for the tells that they're giving a reflexive response. You know, when somebody gives a quick protocol, they haven't thought it through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost like a lack of curiosity, right? And they're trying to move you out. I mean, the doctors that I've interviewed who are the most impressive are people who are deeply, deeply curious. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones that spend the time. Like there's a doctor, Chris Turnpaw. I want to say he's in Pennsylvania, maybe. He spends over an hour and a half on an intake with a patient. Wow. There's Amy Jaramillo, who's actually in South Florida. She's not a doctor, but she works in a clinic that deals with patients with ALS. I think she spends over 2 hours on the intake. And she says, what she said to me is, when I get stuck in a case, I will often go back to my notes because most of the time the patient knows. It's in
Mm.
those notes. There's a hint. There's something in there. And so what these doctors represent are people who are listening to you and looking for the clues, because they believe, like these best doctors believe, that the answers often are known to the patient, even if they're not aware of it.
And so there's the cue. If the doctor isn't listening to you,
Yeah.
then the doctor is making an assumption based on something that may have nothing to do with you.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I think that a danger sign is, I mean, look, doctors charge a lot of money and some of them are worth every penny. But I do think that getting referrals, finding people who've been to these doctors is really important, because there's some fantastic functional medicine doctors out there, but I've also, like in our business, we hear about a lot of functional and other doctors, frankly, who command massive money and often aren't able to deliver the results, or you're not dealing with them, you're dealing with their staff. And so I think that the functional medicine space has become, it's an evolution of the allopathic space, obviously.
Mm.
But just because somebody has a functional medicine moniker doesn't mean that you can, right out of the gate.
And I think it's
fully
really
trust.
important to ask, are they a functional medicine MD or a functional medicine DAOM or an NP? Or, that you can get a functional medicine certification.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Just as a health coach, like
Right.
you definitely, and I think that, I mean, and this is where we go back to old school basics. Find someone who's been there, talk to them. What's your experience been like? And especially when you're laying out that kind of cash. But the tricky thing is, as you said, when you're desperate and looking for answers and you're not well resourced in yourself.
Right.
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 And then the worst combination is you're not well resourced in yourself because your brains are scrambled because you're dealing with all this stuff and you've got a ton of money, and they figure it, oh, well, not a ton of money, but whatever. You're well resourced financially. When you come across the bad actors, you're going to get into trouble.
Yeah.
Right. So asking the questions, getting the referrals, and to your point, sitting there and listening, and really, you'll know, you probably knew.
I didn't the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I should have known when they required the money up front.
Right.
You have to commit to everything to see him at all.
You mean the whole program?
Yeah, I had to pay $13,000 up front in order to be seen by him. He wouldn't see anyone that didn't commit to the full amount of a full diagnostic workup. Yeah.
So you never even had a meeting with him? You never met him before that?
Not before, no. I talked to one of his people on the phone. And then, the greatest piece of advice he gave me was, don't focus on your symptoms.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And it's focusing on symptoms is almost like breathing in pollution. It creates a stress environment in the body.
Mm.
And so when we wake up in the morning with aches and pains and we think about what hurts, or if we think about how tired we are, if we observe the suboptimal state of our body at any point in time, it's a toxin. It creates a little stress response that blocks the body's natural ability to stay regulated.
Mm. But don't you need an awareness in order to be able to move past something? Like, where do you draw the line between checking in with yourself, having awareness of your state, and then making decisions about moving through it versus don't focus? You know what I mean? Like you're getting messages from your body.
Right. And I think it depends on if it's acute or chronic.
Mm.
And so obviously if you cut yourself or you sprain
Pay
an
attention.
ankle or, right?
Yeah.
But once the ankle's sprained, and you know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the ice, you're doing the things.
Yeah.
Don't think about the symptom. Do not bring your attention to the pain.
Right. Right. Well, or maybe don't hyper focus on it. Don't just.
Right. But if you can protect yourself, do all the right things, if the attention to the pain is going to change your course of action, then that's important, perhaps.
Right.
But if you're doing all of the things you need to do and all you're doing is wallowing in the pain.
Right. Perseverating. Yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So too
All right.
many
So
people do that.
he told you not to focus on the symptoms. So what was your next step? What did you do next? So you've now realized, okay, on the upside, that was a really expensive tip. It was a good tip, but a really expensive. So now what? What was next?
Well, when I went back to see him, he asked me what my symptoms were. And I tolerated that for 2 visits before I fired him.
Right.
And then that's when I knew there was nobody else in town. There was nobody who specialized in mold. He was the most revered. He was the most respected. He was the guy. And if he couldn't help me, nobody could. So I cleaned up my environment. I took what I had learned. I watched the moldy documentary that Dave put together. I researched the shoemaker protocol.
Nice.
I had problems with an antifungal that I knew I wasn't going to go hard after it. I was going to do very gentle binders.
Nice.
And I just committed that I would get better. Sound healing, I noticed in that period of time that the Gongs had already eliminated some of my peripheral neuropathy.
That's amazing. That sound therapy is fantastic. It's so, I mean, I'm sure there's people listening to this rolling their eyes going, seriously, gongs? Are you kidding me? But the power of vibration, right? And that resonance with the body and helping the body to open pathways is really an incredible thing. Well, how did you learn about them? Like, how did you come across them?
I'd had a massage therapist take a class in using singing bowls with massage. And she asked me if I wanted her to use singing bowls one day as part of the massage that she was giving me. And I was like, sure, whatever. And so she struck a bowl by my head and that went through my whole body. And I've been changed from that moment.
Wow.
Like feeling the effects of one bowl strike near my head. I was just like, she did a whole thing. But when I finally made it to my first gong bath, again, it just took me to another planet, it feels like, in terms of what I felt and experienced. And these pictures on my wall are sound in water.
Those pictures are spectacular. Guys, if you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify, I invite you to go to YouTube and check this out because I noticed, it's the first thing I noticed behind you. Like, they're stunning.
It's pictures of sound.
In water, like it's the reflection.
It's a reflection of light.
Wasn't there a study recently published? So I read something somewhere about an experiment that was done in a lab where, and people don't laugh, guys, and it's true. They basically had people speak really nasty things to water. And then they put that water under a microscope and observed that the crystallization, like there was no structure to the water, like the crystallization patterns were completely disrupted. And then they took water and they spoke beautiful words to the water, like kindness and beauty and all the things. And then when they put that water under a microscope, the crystalline structures were art. It was like what's behind you now. Yeah. And, I think that it's so interesting in this space that we are in, where we are open to the possibility that things that we could never imagine would be important actually can be really central to our healing.
Absolutely. And that what's behind that is that when we speak hateful things, our heart becomes dysregulated and our HRV goes down. And that collapses our electromagnetic field. It becomes contracted and smaller. And when we speak loving things and appreciative things, and we express love and gratitude, our heart becomes more orderly. HeartMath has been doing research on this since 1992.
Yeah.
And then our field expands. And so this is the nature of relaxing, opening our hearts and allowing our bodies to order themselves.
Yeah.
When we're
Self-regulation.
contracted, we can't heal as well as when we have that openness and that ease within our bodies.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's so true. So just to take it back to the mold, to how you resolve the mold, and then we're going to get into how we get from there to a giant Biohacker Expo thing. So, but before we do make that leap, I just want for the audience, for anyone, I've done a couple of episodes on mold exposure. It is one of the most insidious, nasty kind of organisms that humanity deals with. And if you live in a very dry environment, don't think you're safe, because there's mold that grows in the dry, there's mold that grows in the wet. And so the first thing that you did, though, I think, if I heard correctly, is you removed yourself. You got yourself out, which, to your point, if those pathways in your body are not encumbered, naturally, just getting out of that moldy environment allows your body the space to kind of start to clear and remove these toxins.
The body is clearing mold out of everyone's body. Every day is clearing mold out, period. Yeah. Everybody is eating, breathing, just exposed to mold.
Yeah. And you can heal from it, and you can clear from, like, we have systems built in, but it's when those systems get overwhelmed because we're in a moldy environment that things start to really go sideways. So you got out of the moldy environment. You did the research on the Shoemaker protocol, which is a very well-known protocol. If you guys haven't heard of it and you think you might be dealing with mold, you want to research this, because it's very extensive. And you also, the other thing I heard that I love is, you noticed that being too aggressive with it was going to become worse for you than better. So you allowed yourself the time and the space to apply this protocol in a way that you could tolerate, that allowed you to get better. So how long did it take you to start to feel like, to kind of get your brain back online? Because I'm guessing that that's when the clarity of thought came back and you started rethinking about your career choices.
So the funny thing is that, so I found out, I got the mold test results back in February, started the Gong sessions approximately around that time, bought my first Gong in May, took a sound certification course in August. Mm-hmm. And I thought it would be really neat in August, when I was taking this course, if I had some nature sounds I could play behind my gongs. But I didn't want to use anything I found online. I wanted to go get the sounds of nature. Nice. So I literally, I set out, I left 2 weeks later. I had just gotten the puppy that you may have heard earlier. Mm-hmm. Left him with my then husband for 5.5 weeks. I drove 9,000 miles around the country to capture sounds of nature.
Oh my God, you're kidding me. Okay, so you created your own soundscapes.
I did, except it didn't work. Because that's when I learned that there's no more than 15 minutes of silence anywhere in the US. So one of the things that I learned about how the mold had affected my brain over time was that I realized I got stuck in the present moment, which was why I struggled with reports and spreadsheets and to-do lists and anything that involved a sequence. Mm-hmm. The beauty of what happened to me is that I gained presence. All I had was now. Mm-hmm. And so it looked like, by being able to drive 9,000 miles around the country, it looked like I had healed. It looked like I was better. Right? Because who can do that without being healthy? Mm-hmm. But in reality, I didn't have time. I had no concept of time because my brain was still impaired. Yeah. So I'm driving 6 hours every day. I don't think anything of it.
You could have been a truck driver.
Yeah. It just didn't affect me. Mm-hmm. It never once got to me.
Well, that's a bit of a gift, given your journey.
Yeah.
Right? That's a bit of a gift. So you discovered that there's no more than 15 minutes of silence anywhere in America, which is really quite interesting. So then what?
So I got back, I continued to heal. And then I started to notice the differences between myself and my now ex-husband. And I started to recognize that because I had changed so much, become someone who was present, married to someone who is in business, a maniac, and I had also been that way, that we weren't compatible anymore. And everything he did scared me. And so every time I got scared, it would set back my healing. And so I had to make a decision about how I wanted to live my life. And we talked about it, and we both agreed that we were at points in time where his worry about me was holding him back, and my worry about him was holding me back. And now we're best friends and really happy.
Oh,
And
well, that's
so,
sweet. I love that. I mean, I'm sure it was a hard thing because clearly you still care for each other.
right.
So it would be hard, but at the same time, it's quite something to be able to make that decision and get rid of the friction and enjoy the good parts.
Yes. And then I was like, oh no, the only thing I've been doing for the last 15 years is running events. That's my thing. That's my expertise. That's what I'm great at. I guess I'll give it a go. And so I looked into small venues, and they wanted to charge me as much as the Miami Airport Convention Center would charge me for 75,000 square feet. And so I just had that relationship since 2009. I got the sweetheart deal. I was going to run a gong event. I was going to run a metaphysical, crystals, psychics, artists. I was off the deep end. And then as we were divorcing, we were sitting with a lawyer, and the lawyer asked him how I was different before and after the mold. And he said, oh, she used to be a real boss bitch, but now she sits in a corner and plays gongs.
Jesus.
I was like, no. So I called him later and I said, I don't want to be that person. And he goes,
the boss bitch still lives here. She can't handle the gong girl.
No. And he said, what do you like about the gongs? Why are you so obsessed with them? And I said, well, they're biohacking. He goes, what do you mean they're biohacking? And I said, I explained the science of 30 to 50 hertz and how it penetrates through the bone marrow and lets the lymphatic system drain and the stem cells come out of the bone marrow. And like, they're great. They're really scientific, right?
There's the boss bitch coming back.
Right? She still lives here.
She still lives there. Only maybe
she's got a tiny apartment.
Yeah.
And so he said, then do that. I said, do what? He goes, do biohacking. I said, what do you mean do biohacking? Do an event about biohacking. I was like, can I do that? And he goes, I don't know. I'd never heard of a biohacking event. I had never been to one. I'd never been to any health expo ever. And then I just started to look online, and I figured out I could build a model and I can create an event. That's my core competency now.
Wow.
And then I had this sweetheart deal on the building. And the trouble is that when you get a building that big, you have to fill it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big space.
Yeah.
And so your first one was was it 2022 or 20? I'm trying
24.
to remember when we met.
I've only done the one last February.
Last year, right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you would have seen me walking around in 23.
At A4M.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right.
Wow. And
we were at that dinner.
I didn't get to go to that event, but from what I've heard, it was fantastic.
Thank you.
Like really good energy. And you know what I love is, so never mind. First of all, is there a gong booth at your event?
I have an area called the Vibe Zone.
You do? Okay, good.
I do. I brought a gong last year. I may bring a gong again this year, or at least have a friend bring a gong.
I think you got to open and close the event with the gong.
I think that is appropriate, actually. Yeah. But it's not the same as a sound healing ceremony.
No.
But what we are doing is we're bringing Mark Soto, who was the recording engineer behind the Monroe Institute for decades.
Oh, wow.
And he's got his own program now called the Triad Mind. And he's bringing people to altered states of consciousness through a combination of relaxation exercises and the way the audio is programmed. And just allowing the body to let go so that the spirit can expand, just like I was saying with the water. You know, we can, through these exercises, expand our intuition and our communication with the outside world. I mean, if you think that the internet can travel packets of data through the air, but we can't, like, what, we're not the most advanced being on civilization? Of course we are, right?
100%.
Information doesn't have to be spoken to be transmitted. Even in the FBI and the CIA, they train you, if you're following someone, you can't look at them because they'll know. That's science. That's real. We have real world practical applications about knowing that our thoughts impact another person.
100%. When I did, I was in the first cohort of Dave's Bulletproof Coach, Human Potential Coaches.
Okay.
And one of the things that I think it was Mark who talked about this, and we were trained in heart math and all that stuff. But one of the things he taught us was about human Wi-Fi. And this is when you come into the presence of another person. And you know what, guys? I don't care how nuts and bolts and hardcore science you think you are. When you come into the presence of another person, you have an instinctive like, dislike, connection, disconnection. You're wary of that person. You feel that you can trust them. That is human Wi-Fi. That is your energetic field picking up information from theirs and vice versa. And it's unspoken. And then you may choose to override it. That's, whatever the case, we have that ability as well as humans. But if you don't think you've ever experienced this before, think about this and think about it the next time you come into the presence of another person. And I promise you that you will notice something.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So the event is not, so the event that you created, you decided basically, I'm going to get away from this little 200-foot view. I'm going to take a 10,000-foot view. I'm going to bring my arms around a whole industry that this is a part of. And so tell us about the event. And so you're basically healed now, right? You're through.
I'm different. I'm different now, but I like me.
That's important.
And I don't want to be, the boss bitch can have a room in the house, but she can't run the house anymore.
Yeah.
And so I like balance. Where I am. And I still struggle getting through a to-do list in the day because I want to do everything. And in presence, I'll forget about something else. But when I first started working a year and a half ago, I wouldn't remember to look at my calendar. And now at least I can follow a calendar.
And so do you feel that you're still dealing with some of the effects of the mold that you had to deal with? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
Well, you're in the right place. I mean, Lord knows there's a lot of people in this space that I'm sure you're picking up tidbits every day.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so the event, when I decided I would do this, I took a hard look at myself and what I went through trying to heal, how much money I spent on devices that didn't work until I got to the root of the issue. So photobiomodulation didn't help. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy didn't help. Until I was able to understand I had to detox mold.
Yeah.
And then actually do it.
Yeah.
These added therapies and the supplements. I was on all these mitochondrial supporting supplements. They didn't help.
And they're all gummed up with mold. You got to get rid of that shit. Yeah.
You'll have to tell me about that later.
Well, you know what it is? I mean, it's a funny thing about mitochondria, and we're probably we're over our half hour by a mile. The funny thing about mitochondria that people are always talking about boosting mitochondria. I would like to invite you to think about what mitochondria are, and they're physical little engines that spin at 2,900 RPM or something. So think about the fact that things like deuterium and toxins and whatever in the cell will gum up, it'll get in the way of the spin. So imagine that your car engine is filled with gunk and you somehow figure out a way to boost it, what's going to happen? You're going to break the engine.
Yeah.
Right? A, you're not going to get the performance that you're looking for, but B, you run the risk of damaging the engine. Mitochondria are not that different. And so I often talk to people about, people come to me and they say, okay, well, I want to use, let's say they want to use a peptide that boosts mitochondria. I'm like, well, let's back it up. let's clean up your life. Let's clean up your environment. Let's do a run of deuterium depleted water, let's say, where let's heal the mitochondria before we give them that turbocharge.
Well, that's when we get to the pictures on the wall, the pictures of sound. So our cells are made mostly of water, and our cells are vibrating. Our cells have little antenna on them. It's not even just the ion channels that open and close. There are antenna, these little hairs that pick up signals from around the body. And if those get gummed up, the brain is over. Like, how many people wake up at 4 a.m. because their cortisol's spiking?
Yeah, at the wrong time.
Right.
Yeah.
And that wrong time is happening because the information superhighway of the body has a traffic jam somewhere. And if we can't get the right signals in the right place, there's all kinds of things we can do to bypass it. I mean, we can use stem cells to heal a hip that isn't right. Like, we can take something from one place and put it in another, and that's biohacking, and that's fantastic. But if we have a chronic condition, we have to clear it out.
Yeah, 100%. So let's go back to the event, because we're coming up on time, and I want to leave people with an understanding of why they might just want to find themselves in Miami on February 28th.
Thank you.
Of 2025.
I would really love to see everyone there.
Yeah, I'd love people to understand why this event is, whether you're healthy, looking to optimize, or you're dealing with something and you're not sure what it is. And we know that we can't optimize a system that's not already in balance. So you're trying to get to that balance state so that you can optimize. So
I'm going to tell you what makes my event different
from
some of the others.
Tell us.
There are events out there that are geared towards people who've been biohacking a long time. And they're mostly elite performers in work, in fitness, in life. Sometimes that's a little intimidating. Sometimes it's thrilling, right? Sometimes for some people, if they're not there yet, if they're just starting to heal, it might feel intimidating. Even at those events, though, I will say everyone there got there from a point of pain turned into purpose. Doesn't matter where you go. If it's the fitness jocks, the beautiful people, whatever it is, if you're in a biohacking space, you're in a room full of people that healed something.
Yep.
Every time.
100%.
And then some other events are really focused on clinicians, and they're really professional, and they're high-end conferences, and they're like really overly academic, and maybe not speaking to the level of the mom who's fighting for her kid's health. And at my event, I bring experiences and real tactics and solutions in a mix of experts and real world people telling real stories, so that people can make that connection about what maybe the next thing is for them.
Nice.
And I want people to try and experiment. So I think I have more experiences in the room than at any other event.
I love that. Love that. So that you cannot run around spending $500, $600, $800, $1,000 on all this stuff.
Right.
And then only to discover, it's not working. And you can also, and I would imagine at your event, and that is the beauty of live events really, is being able to connect with the founders and the people who came up with this stuff, so that you can have a conversation with them. You can get your hands on the technology or whatever it is, and really get a sense of, is this the thing for me now? And that is a question people need to ask, because this could be the thing for you, but it may not be the first thing you need to do.
Right.
Right. And
I do light therapy on my brain now. It works now.
It wasn't then.
It didn't work then.
Yeah.
My mitochondria were blocked.
Yeah.
I was eating canola oil.
Oh.
It was organic.
Yeah.
So it must have been healthy, right? I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything. I thought oatmeal with cranberries was a healthy breakfast.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of nuance to nutrition that often gets left out. But the first step, usually for most people that are starting from a standard American diet, is to clean out all the stuff, get yourself feeling like you can feel in, and oddly over the last month, I've probably mentioned the Whole30 1,000 times because it's free, it's simple, it's easy. It allows you to feel different. It gives you a new baseline. And then you can start experimenting with stuff and noticing,
Yeah.
does the oatmeal make me feel good or does the oatmeal make me feel bad? And maybe there's a better oatmeal, and maybe I don't want the cranberries that are coated in canola oil and sugar. Maybe I need something different. You know what I mean? Like you can
Right.
start to
Right.
you evolve your understanding, and you can get yourself to a place
Yeah.
where and what biohacking is about, and what you're really communicating here through your event is, and it's about taking agency over yourself. So it's about educating yourself and exposing yourself to new information and ideas so that you can start making better decisions. But I would think your event also is going to be of value to people who've already started their journey in the biohacking space and are ready to take it up to the next level, because you're meeting people where they are. And in that, you're going to offer quite a range of options for people. But it's just that you have that awareness of the person that's just getting started, which a lot of people don't.
Yeah, I think I definitely cater to that person more than the person who's been doing it a long time. I do think that the beauty of gathering in events like this is that we can talk to one another about what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I had a conversation the other day that we won't repeat here because we're being recorded. And I bought the product you told me about. And I'm just thrilled to have that information. And what everybody needs to understand about biohacking as an industry is that we're not allowed to talk about certain things. We're not allowed to say when something cures or reverses a condition. It's not legal.
Yeah.
We can say things only in very wishy-washy terms.
Yeah.
This may do this. This may support that.
It's been observed that.
Yeah. We have to be so delicate with our words. And so it looks pretty woo-woo from the outside.
But there's a lot of science behind a lot of it.
A ton of science.
And so when we come into community, we're really able to share things in a different way. So, okay. So we're going to wrap this up. Why don't you tell the nice people where they can get more information? I'm super excited that I'm going to be presenting on the Friday morning at the Biohacking Expo on Feb 28th. We're still working out my topic, and it's going to be amazing. I can just tell you. Well, by the time the podcast airs, I'll be telling you what it's all about in the intro. But please tell people a little bit about where they can get more information, where they can sign up, how they can get a ticket, all the things.
So Biohacker Expo is in Miami at the Miami Airport Convention Center, February 28th and March 1st. It's a Friday and a Saturday. You can go to the website, biohackerexpo.com. And if you enter the code NAT50, you'll save 50% off a general admission.
Yeah. So just to be clear, folks, that's 50%, not $50, 50%. Half the price is your price.
Yeah.
Sandy, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. And also, do you have an Instagram channel as well that people can?
Yes,
can
it's
visit?
at Biohacker Expo.
Perfect. So it's at Biohacker Expo on Instagram. Biohackerexpo.com is the website. And folks, I hope that I get to see you there. And Sandy, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.